There are two very different ways to live life, or two very different ways to look at life. And when I say different, I don't mean different in terms of degree, so that one can be in any way compared with the other. This is more a difference of kind. And the two ways of living are what we could call properly antithetical to each other. Moreover, we could say, just to make it a bit clearer, that the first way of living, or the first way of looking at life, completely disallows the second way. So when we live the first way, we have absolutely no means of knowing anything about the second way. It doesn't exist for us at all. We don't have any capacity to appreciate that there could be a different way, any different way. But when we are living in the second way, we're perfectly aware of the first way of living. It's just that it doesn't hold any attraction to us. We can see that there's no real benefit in living life that way, because it's too narrow, it's too constrained, and there's no freedom in it. There's no free will in it at all. So the first way of living life is when we live life on the basis of thought. So when we live life on the basis of thought, nothing can ever happen that won't be interpreted in terms of thought's categories. And we're never going to do anything that isn't predetermined by thought's categories, or thought's map of what it is possible to do. So in other words, thought is the blueprint, determines absolutely everything. So our life, when we're living in the first modality, is nothing more than thought, because it's thought which informs us. It's thought which tells us everything. It doesn't just tell us what the world is or what reality is. It tells us who we are. And it doesn't just tell us who we are. It tells us what we want and what we're feeling. As David Bohm says somewhere, so thought says you're having a great time. And because it's only by reference to thought that I can know anything, that's how I know that I'm having a great time, because thought tells me this. Or thought tells me that I'm having a really rotten time. So then again, I can't question this at all. If thought says it, it must be true. Thought can tell me that I'm a great person, and straight away I'll believe this. Naturally enough, I'll be happy enough to believe this. I'll go along with that. And just as readily, thought can flip round and tell me that I'm a useless, horrible, worthless person, a bad person, a very bad person. And equally, I will believe that. I will be freaked out by it, and horrified by it, and shocked by it. But I can't see through it. because thought has that power over me. Thought has me under its hypnotic influence. So, even though this doesn't sound particularly convivial, it does suit me. On one level, I really do like being totally determined or defined by thought. And I like being in the world that thought has defined for me. And the reason I like it is because when the world is described by thought, it becomes definite. It becomes made out of definite categories, or I can make definite statements about the world that I know are not arbitrary, but actually not provisionally true, but absolutely true. So in other words, the world has this quality of being definite. There's definite things in it that are definitely what they are, and they're definitely not anything else. So a jam jar is a jam jar, a poker is a poker, a bicycle is a bicycle, a top hat is a top hat. These things are definitely what they are, and they're not anything else. So there's a great security in living in a world like this, because it's all very neat and tidy, and everything is what it says it is on the label, which allows us to go on living our lives without ever having to question the bedrock, the basic stratum of what the world appears to be. So we're free from the need to question. And that's another way of saying that we're free from the possibility of being surprised. And this does sound kind of strange, because we think, well, it can be nice to be surprised. There's such a thing as a nice surprise, a pleasant surprise. We all like to be surprised sometimes, in a nice way. So what is it, in that case, that we have against being surprised, you could ask? And probably the best way, or at least a way of answering that, is to say that when we are provided with a picture of the world, that's fine. In a way, we could say any particular picture or any particular way of describing the world is fine. But then what happens almost inevitably is that when we are provided with a picture of the world, we invest in that picture, we invest ourselves in that picture. In other words, we engage in all sorts of activities that are only meaningful if this picture of the world is absolutely finally true. So we're acting as if this is the final reality. And that's fine as well. There's nothing to stop us acting as if the reality that the mind supplies us with is the only reality, the final reality, and that there's nothing beyond it. That's fine too. That's part of the game. It's very natural that we would do that. So it's kind of like saying that we're building structures. We've been given a plot of land and we build all sorts of stuff on it. Not just houses, but housing estates, tower blocks, office blocks. So a whole load of stuff. We just keep on building and building, building. And so our plot of land ends up looking like Manhattan or Tokyo. But because we have invested in all that superstructure, we've also created the possibility of a very painful thing, or a catastrophe. And that painful thing is discovering that that apparent reality, apparent final reality, isn't a final reality at all. It's just one more way of looking at things. Now, because we were acting as if that was a final reality, to be surprised by discovering that it isn't, and that there are endless other realities or endless other ways of looking at reality, stops being a pleasant surprise. It's not a pleasant surprise for us because we've absolutely invested a hell of a lot in the reality that thought showed us as being the only reality. So we're attached. We've put a lot of ourselves in that, and we're attached to it, which is another way of saying that if it is all lost in a second, which it is, because it becomes meaningless as soon as I find out that what I thought was a final reality isn't a final reality. It becomes absolutely meaningless. It was only meaningful if there wasn't any other way of looking at reality. And so really, you could say that I've built lots of structures, but we could also say that I've created a self on the basis of this way of looking at the world that thought has shown me. And saying that makes it easier to see why it is such a frightening thing to find that the so-called final reality isn't a final reality, and that there are endless different ways of looking at it. Because this notion of the self that is very real to me and very meaningful is falsified by getting any extra perspective. It becomes meaningless, it becomes nothing, which in itself is a painless thing because it never was anything anyway. So forms can flicker into existence and flicker out again with the greatest of ease, because that's what forms do. But because I have said that this form is me, I am nothing else, I am this, what we're talking about now is death, really. It's the death of what I take to be myself, and the fact that it isn't really anything more than a provisional exercise in as if. In other words, I'm saying I'm acting, my whole life I've been acting as if this is who I am, as if this is the final reality of who I am. And it's an as if that I've taken so seriously, and that I no longer realize to be an as if. So instead of as if, we've knocked the if off, and it's just we've knocked the as if off, and it's like is instead. This is me. So the is kind of the word that that's what Robert Anton Wilson calls the is of identification. It's a very kind of a rigid word, is, or am. I am this, I am this. So because we've lost the relativity of it is as if I am this self, and instead I'm seeing it as I am this self, that rigidity means that I'm in conflict with reality itself, because I'm trying to say that there is an is, or that there is an I am, this fixed form. And because I'm saying that, I'm flying in the face of reality, because there is no is and there is no am. Everything is just strictly provisional. So straight away, anxiety is born by living life on terms of thought. So there's the thing that I like, which is the definite reality, and the kind of super oversimplified situation where everything just is where it is. And we could call that kind of the safe kind of world, where we never have to question, or we never have to reflect on anything. We can just bumble along, doing whatever things seem important to us or meaningful to us, on the basis of this self being who I absolutely are, and on the basis of this world being the absolute final, an absolute final reality. And we can do that, and we can have that type of fun. So it is a type of fun. It's the type of fun we have in a game. It's limited. It's a limited type of fun, because we can very quickly, well, maybe not quickly, but we will sooner or later get fed up, because it's all just the same. We're starting off from these basic assumptions, and we're just playing out these assumptions over and over and over again, and it gets tiresome, it gets wearisome, and it becomes meaningless. It becomes meaningless precisely because there's nothing new in it ever. And so obviously living a life in which there's nothing ever, anything really new going to happen, is worse than wearisome. It's really a kind of a torture or a nightmare that we can't recognize as such. But at first it seems fun. So that's the thing about the game. At first it seems fun, and it can seem like a lot of fun, a whole heap of fun. And we really do get excited playing, and we get real stuck into playing it. And we invest in the game. And then later on, the second phase of it is that it isn't so much fun. And the fun becomes thin. It becomes thinner and thinner and thinner, until it becomes so thin we couldn't even really call it fun. So I don't know what we call it then. It's just carrying on with the rigmarole for the sake of carrying on the rigmarole, because we don't know what else to do. Because in pragmatic terms, there is nothing else for us to do, since we have shut the door on radical surprise, or we've shut the door on anything new. Anything new doesn't exist for us. It really, really, in pragmatic terms, does not exist for us. So how can we ever have it? So even though I've just said it doesn't exist for us, it doesn't exist subjectively, but it still exists. Obviously, it's still out there. The radical new, or the radically surprising, is still out there. But now we have a new type of relationship with it. So when we're living life based on thought, we still have a relationship with radical newness, even though thought itself is the quintessence of the denial of radical newness. Thought can never work if there is such a thing as radical newness. Thought cannot be thought in that case, so thought itself is the denial of newness, which is another way of saying what Krishnamurti said, that thought is always old. So our relationship with Radical newness is that we are denying it. We've made it not exist for us, which clearly means we're not relating to it at all. But the fact that radical newness is still there means that we have a type of relationship with it that we haven't bargained for, really. So we have a relationship with whatever we deny. And the relationship is that, I suppose it could be said that the relationship is fear. And we don't know what it is we fear because we don't have any means of relating to it at all. It doesn't subjectively exist for us. But even so, we have fear and we don't know what we're afraid of. And in anxiety, we're afraid of the bad thing happening, or the disastrous outcome, or the catastrophic outcome. And very often we can interpret this perception of a catastrophic outcome in terms of the known, in terms of day-to-day events. Oh, this will go wrong, that'll go wrong, which makes perfect sense, and we're able to keep everything within the realm of the known. But really, what our anxiety is about the radical unknown, which will falsify everything we think that we do know. And so it's this fear of the radical unknown that is giving the juice to our anxiety, and the anxiety can attach to all sorts of things. But the terror of these situations, which are very normal situations, goes far beyond the terror that they ought to possess for us, because often they're relatively small catastrophes and they don't deserve so much negative anticipation, so much fear. So in one way we can say, well, this isn't straightforward. I'm scared of something more than just the bad thing happening. There's something lurking behind this. And so what is happening in anxiety is that our denied relationship with the radical new, which is the same thing as reality, since reality is always a surprise, it has contaminated my safe world of the known, the domain of the known, which was safe. But it was only safe for so long before this contamination took hold and spread like some kind of penicillin mold on a petri dish, or like rust on a steel structure. And it's a kind of an irreversible thing. In that, once it sets in and progresses, we can't peel it back, like we might imagine that it's possible to. And it would be if anxiety were just some relatively superficial or trivial affair, but it isn't. It's a profound consequence of our way of living. So we can say, to start off with, that living life on the basis of thought saves us from a certain sort of difficulty, which really doesn't have to be a difficulty at all if we weren't invested in what we think we already know and what we already think we possess, at the price of losing everything painfully and slowly and against our will later on. So that's one way of looking at anxiety. Okay, thanks for watching.